He wasn't supposed to be there. The house was too quiet for a lie to survive in it. When Camille turned and saw him standing in the doorway, her first instinct wasn't relief. It was fear. Julian Mercer never rushed. Not in court, not in negotiation rooms, and certainly not in his own life. Precision had built everything he owned: his reputation, his firm, his marriage. That morning, everything followed the script. Camille stood in the kitchen sunlight cutting across the marble countertops, her back turned as she poured coffee into his travel mug. She wore one of his shirts, white oversized sleeves rolled carelessly. It was a detail that used to feel intimate. Now it felt staged. "You'll miss your flight," she said without turning around. Julian adjusted his cufflinks slowly, watching her reflection in the glass of the cabinet. "I won't." A beat. She nodded too quickly. That was the first fracture. He noticed the way her phone lit up on the counter. Face down, vibrating once, then silenced immediately. Camille didn't reach for it. That was new. She used to check everything. Julian picked up his coat. "Don't wait up." "I never do," she replied, almost smiling. Almost. He walked out without another word. At the airport, everything was efficient. Security, lounge, boarding call. Julian sat near the window, hands folded, watching planes taxi across the runway. He didn't open his laptop, didn't check emails, didn't call anyone. Instead, he replayed. The late nights Camille stopped explaining. The sudden interest in client dinners that didn't align with her calendar. The shift in tone. Subtle but consistent. Less warmth. More calculation. And then the smallest detail of all. She had stopped asking when he would be back. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The boarding announcement echoed again. Final call. He stared at the screen for a long second. Then he stood up, not toward the gate, toward the exit. The ride back into Manhattan was quiet. Traffic crawled horns blending into a dull, constant hum. Julian leaned back, eyes half closed, not resting. Processing. He wasn't angry. That would come later, if at all. Right now, there was only clarity. If something existed, it would reveal itself. All it needed was the right interruption. The apartment building greeted him with the same polished indifference. The doorman nodded, surprised but silent. Julian took the elevator alone. 32nd floor. The doors slid open with a soft chime. He stepped out, his footsteps absorbed by thick carpet until he reached the door. Unlocked. Another detail. He pushed it open slowly. The scent hit first. Not unfamiliar, but layered. Camille's perfume. And something else. Subtle, but wrong. He stepped inside. Silence. Then, a voice. Camille's. From the living room. Light. Distracted. Not the voice she used with him. Julian moved forward, each step measured. He didn't announce himself. Didn't need to. The moment he crossed the threshold into the living room, everything stopped. Camille turned. Her face changed before she could stop it. Eyes widening, lips parting, color draining. "You didn't leave," she said. "Not? You're back. Not? What happened?" "You didn't leave." Julian said nothing. He just looked at her and waited. The silence stretched. Camille's fingers tightened around the glass in her hand. It trembled slightly, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Julian was. I thought your flight was at 9, she added quickly. It was. Another pause. She blinked. Once? Twice? Something shifted behind her. Just out of sight. A shadow. A presence. Not visible, but undeniable. Julian's gaze flickered just for a fraction of a second toward the hallway leading to the bedroom. Then back to her. Camille followed that glance. That was her mistake. "No one's here," she said immediately. Too fast. Too sharp. Julian tilted his head slightly. "I didn't ask." The air changed. Camille's breathing became audible now. Uneven, shallow. She set the glass down, but it hit the table harder than intended. A dull, betraying sound. "You're early," she said. Julian stepped further into the room, placing his keys down with quiet precision. The trip was canceled. Why? Her voice cracked on the word. Julian looked at her again, longer this time, as if measuring how much of the truth she could carry. Did that cause a problem, he asked? Camille froze. Not completely, but enough. Her shoulders locked, her lips pressed together, then parted again. I don't understand what you're implying. Julian's expression didn't change. That makes two of us. Another silence. He walked past her, slow, deliberate, toward the hallway. Camille moved instantly, stepping into his path. Too fast, too desperate. Julian. He stopped, close enough now to see the fine tremor in her jaw, the slight sheen of sweat at her hairline. I just got out of the shower, she said, as if that explained anything. Julian's eyes dropped briefly to the damp ends of her hair, then back up, and she opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time since he'd walked in, she had nothing. Behind her, somewhere deeper in the apartment, something shifted. A floorboard. Soft, but final. Julian heard it. Camille definitely did. Her eyes flickered again. That was enough. The truth no longer needed to be spoken. It was already in the room. Julian exhaled slowly. Not in anger, not in shock, but in confirmation. And when he looked at her again, something inside him had already stepped back. Not broken, just gone. Move, he said quietly. Camille didn't. Not immediately. And in that hesitation, everything collapsed. The boarding announcement repeated for the third time, sharper, now less patient. Final call for Flight 271 to Chicago. Julian Mercer didn't move. He sat in the corner of the lounge, one ankle resting over his knee, fingers loosely interlocked, as if he were waiting for someone. Except no one was coming. Around him, passengers gathered their things in a quiet rush, the soft choreography of departure unfolding with mechanical certainty. Everything moved forward, except him. On the glass wall in front of him, his reflection stared back. Calm, composed, unreadable. The same face he wore in courtrooms when opposing counsel thought they had the upper hand. They were always wrong. His phone rested on the table beside him. The screen was dark now, but 10 minutes earlier it had lit up with a notification Camille hadn't meant for him to see. Not a message. A calendar alert. Dinner. A C. No context. No explanation. Just initials. Julian hadn't touched the phone since. He didn't need to, because it wasn't just the alert. It was how quickly she had taken the phone from the counter that morning, her thumb moving faster than her expression could catch up. It was the way she had avoided eye contact. Not nervously, but strategically. Controlled. Intentional. Camille didn't panic easily, which meant when she did, it mattered. Sir, a voice interrupted. A flight attendant stood nearby, polite but firm. We're about to close the gate. Julian looked up at her, then past her, toward the jet bridge, where the last few passengers disappeared into the narrow corridor. A clean exit. A predictable path. He had taken it his entire life. Until now. Julian gave a small nod, almost appreciative. Thank you. But he didn't stand. The attendant hesitated for a second, then nodded back and walked away. The gate door slid shut with a soft final click. And just like that, the decision was made. Julian reached for his phone, not to call Camille, not to check the flight status. Instead, he opened his email and typed a single message to his assistant. Reschedule Chicago. Indefinite delay. He hit send. No explanation. There never was one. The car ride back into Manhattan unfolded beneath a gray sky. The city muted, but restless. Traffic pressed in from every direction, horns blending into a dull, constant rhythm. Julian sat in the back seat, one hand resting against his chin, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. But his mind. His mind moved precisely, not emotionally, sequentially. The late nights Camille had started having 3 months ago, always explained, never proven. The subtle shift in her routines. Gym sessions at inconsistent hours, meetings that didn't align with her firm's typical clients. And then there was Adrian Cole. The name surfaced without effort. A venture capitalist, frequently in the news, occasionally mentioned by Camille in passing, too casually, as if rehearsed. Julian didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in patterns, and Camille had begun to form one. "Do you want me to take the tunnel or stay on the surface?" the driver asked. Julian didn't answer immediately. He watched a couple on the sidewalk, laughing, leaning into each other as if the rest of the world didn't exist. Unaware, uncomplicated. Then he looked forward again. "Surface." The driver nodded. More time. That was the point. Julian wasn't going back to confront. He was going back to observe. There was a difference. He arrived at the building just past 10 in the morning. Too early for a casual return. Too late for coincidence. The doorman. Thomas straightened slightly when he saw him. "Mr. Mercer, you're back." Julian stepped inside, removing his gloves with slow precision. "Change of plans." Thomas nodded, though his expression held a flicker of curiosity he quickly masked. "Mrs. Mercer is upstairs," he added. Julian paused just long enough for that detail to settle. "I assumed." The elevator ride was silent. 30 floors. Each one ticking upward with quiet inevitability. Julian watched the numbers change, his reflection faintly visible in the brushed steel doors. There was no anger in his face. No hesitation. Just a stillness that felt deliberate, calculated. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object. A key fob. Not for the front door. For something else. He turned it over once in his hand, then slipped it back inside. Not yet. When the elevator doors opened, the hallway stretched ahead. Empty, carpeted, soundless. Julian walked toward his apartment. Step by step. Measured. He noticed the door before he reached it. Unlocked. Again. Camille never left it unlocked. Not in this building. Not ever. Julian stopped in front of it, his hand hovering just above the handle. For a brief moment. Everything aligned. The calendar alert, the changed routines, the unlocked door, the silence. He wasn't walking into uncertainty anymore. He was stepping into confirmation. He opened the door without a sound. The apartment greeted him with stillness, but not absence. There was a presence here, subtle, layered, wrong. Julian stepped inside, closing the door behind him with quiet precision. He didn't call out, didn't announce himself. Instead, he listened. A voice drifted from deeper inside the apartment. Camille's. Light. Distracted. Unaware. And underneath it. Something else. A second rhythm. A shift in space. Julian moved forward. Slowly. Each step narrowing the distance between suspicion and truth. By the time he reached the edge of the living room, he already knew. Not from what he saw, but from what she said. "You didn't leave." The moment replayed in his mind again, even as he stood there now. Not as shock, but as evidence, because Camille hadn't been surprised he returned. She had been surprised he never left. And that difference was everything. Julian's gaze settled on her once more, taking in every detail she couldn't hide. The tension in her posture, the misalignment in her tone, the space she was trying, desperately, to control. But control required stability, and Camille was already losing it. Julian said nothing, because silence was doing the work for him. Somewhere behind her, faint but undeniable, a shift, a presence. A man who hadn't yet revealed himself. Julian didn't need to see him. Not yet, because the real collapse was happening right in front of him, and Camille was unraveling faster than she realized. Julian took one step forward, not aggressive, not hesitant, just enough, the kind of step that closed distance without warning. Did that cause a problem? He repeated quietly. Camille's breath caught. Her eyes flickered again, toward the hallway, toward him, back again, and in that fraction of a second, she answered, without saying a word. Julian understood something then. This wasn't a moment. It was a structure, built over time, layered with lies, maintained with precision, and now, cracking. He didn't need to break it. He just needed to let it collapse. "Move," he said again. Softer this time. More certain. Camille didn't. Not fully. But her body shifted just enough. Just slightly. To reveal what she had been trying to hide. The line of sight. The hallway. The truth waiting at the end of it. Julian's gaze followed. And this time, he didn't look away. Everything was about to become visible. And neither of them was ready for what came next. The apartment held its breath. Julian stood just inside the living room, the quiet stretching so thin it felt like it might tear. Camille hadn't moved, not really. Just enough to betray herself, not enough to fix it. "You didn't leave." The words still lingered in the air, heavier now, stripped of instinct and exposed for what they were. Julian didn't answer immediately. He let the silence settle around them. Let it press into her. Let it demand something she couldn't give cleanly anymore. Camille swallowed. Her hand drifted toward the edge of the table, fingers brushing the glass she had set down too hard. She didn't pick it up. She just needed something to anchor herself. "I mean, your flight?" She tried again, her voice tightening, reshaping itself too quickly. "I thought you were already on your way." Julian's gaze didn't shift. "I was." A pause. "Then why are you here?" The question came out wrong. Not curious, not concerned, defensive. Julian tilted his head slightly, studying her as if she had just said something far more revealing than she intended. "Is that what you want to ask?" he said quietly. Camille's lips parted, closed. Behind her, the apartment remained still. Too still. The kind of stillness that wasn't empty, just controlled. Contained. Julian let his eyes drift again past her shoulder toward the hallway. Camille noticed. This time she didn't follow his gaze immediately. She tried not to. That effort alone was enough. "No one's here," she said slower now. More deliberate, as if pacing herself would fix the damage already done. Julian didn't respond. Didn't challenge it. He simply stepped forward. One step. Measured. Camille reacted instantly, her body shifting into his path again, more forceful this time, less subtle. Julian. His name wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. He stopped, not because she blocked him, but because he chose to. They stood closer now, close enough for him to see the fine tremor in her breathing, the way her throat moved as she swallowed again, harder this time. "I canceled the trip," he said. Her eyes flickered. "I heard you. Did you?" Another pause. Camille forced a small exhale as if steadying herself. "Yes, you said it was canceled. That's fine. I just didn't expect you back so soon." Julian's expression remained unchanged. "Why not?" The question landed differently this time. Not casual, not rhetorical. Camille hesitated. "Too long. I just—" She began, then stopped, recalibrating. "You usually go straight to the hotel. You don't come back." Julian watched her closely. Usually. The word hung there unfinished, because nothing about this was usual. A faint sound came from down the hallway. Not loud, not accidental enough to dismiss. A shift of weight. A breath that wasn't Camille's. Camille heard it. Her body reacted before her mind could intervene. Shoulders tightening, eyes flashing toward the source for less than a second. Julian saw it. That was all he needed. He didn't look toward the hallway this time. He looked at her, directly. And in that moment, something irreversible passed between them. Not confirmation. Recognition. "You should go," Camille said suddenly, her voice sharper now, urgency breaking through the cracks. "If your trip is just delayed, you might still—" "Camille." He said her name quietly. Not raised, not harsh. But it stopped her completely. Her mouth closed mid-sentence. Julian stepped closer. Not aggressively, but undeniably. The space between them collapsed. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. The words didn't carry emotion. They carried certainty. Camille's composure fractured. Not all at once. In pieces. Her breathing lost rhythm. Her hands, which had been carefully still, now shifted without purpose. Touching the table, then her hair, then nothing. "You're overreacting," she said too quickly, the words stumbling over each other. "There's nothing here. You're making this into something it's not." Julian held her gaze. "And what is it?" She blinked. Once, twice. No answer came, because there wasn't one that would hold. Another sound, closer this time. Not hidden well enough. A floorboard faint but distinct. Julian's eyes finally moved, slowly, past her, toward the hallway. Camille stepped in front of him again, faster than before, more desperate. "Stop." The word broke out of her before she could soften it. Julian's gaze returned to her. There it was. Not denial anymore. Not confusion. Fear. Raw. Immediate. Uncontained. "Move," he said. This time it wasn't a request. Camille shook her head barely. "No." Her voice dropped almost pleading now. "Julian, please, just let me explain. You already did." "I didn't say anything. You didn't have to." Silence again. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was suffocating. Camille's eyes glistened, not with tears yet, but with the pressure building behind them. Her control was slipping, and she knew it. "You're imagining things," she said softer now, trying a different angle, trying to regain something. "Anything. You came back unexpectedly. Of course it feels strange. That's all this is." Julian didn't respond. He just stepped to the side, not pushing her, not forcing her, just moving. And for a split second, Camille didn't react fast enough. The line of sight opened, the hallway, the bedroom door, slightly ajar, and in that narrow gap, movement, not clear, not complete, but enough, a shadow shifting where no shadow should be. Julian stopped, not in shock, in confirmation. Behind him, Camille made a sound, small, broken, almost inaudible. No. Too late. The moment had already passed. The truth had already entered the room. Julian didn't move forward again. He didn't need to. He had seen enough. More than enough. He turned back to her slowly. Camille looked smaller now. Not physically, but structurally. Like something holding her together had been removed without warning. Her lips trembled slightly as she tried to form words that would undo what had just happened. "They. He. It's not what you think." She said, the sentence collapsing as she spoke it. Julian watched her, calm, still, unreachable. "Then tell me what it is." She couldn't. Because every version of the truth led to the same place. Exposure. Loss. End. Behind the door the presence remained. Silent now. Waiting. But no longer hidden. Julian exhaled quietly. Not in anger. Not in relief. But in finality. The illusion was gone. And in its place, something far colder had taken hold. "Call him out," Julian said. Camille froze. Completely this time. Her eyes widened, panic surging fully to the surface now. "Don't," she whispered. It wasn't a request. It was fear. Julian held her gaze for one last second. Then, without raising his voice, "Or I will." The silence that followed was no longer fragile. It was shattered, and there was no putting it back together. Camille didn't call him out. She just stood there, still, pale, breathing too fast. Julian watched the decision form, and fail, behind her eyes. That was the first real collapse, not the discovery, not the shadow behind the door, but this, her inability to act. "You heard me?" Julian said, his voice even almost quiet enough to disappear into the room. Camille shook her head once, not in refusal, in delay. I need a second," she whispered. Julian didn't move. "Take it." The permission wasn't kindness. It was a trap. Because time didn't help her. Time exposed her. She turned slightly, just enough to angle her body toward the hallway, but not enough to reveal it completely. Her fingers pressed together, then released, then pressed again. Julian. This isn't what it looks like. She said the sentence smoother, this time rehearsed. Retrieved from somewhere she had prepared for a different version of this moment. Julian nodded once. Then what does it look like? Her mouth opened, closed, reset. It looks like you came home early and misunderstood something, she said more firmly now, trying to stabilize her voice. That's all. Julian considered that. Not dismissing it, not accepting it, just letting it exist. And what did I misunderstand? Another pause. Camille's eyes flickered. Not to the hallway this time, but to the coffee table. The glass. The small, ordinary objects that suddenly felt like evidence. Nothing, she said. Too quickly. Julian tilted his head slightly. You just said I misunderstood something. I mean, there's nothing to misunderstand? She corrected the shift, subtle but visible. Julian nodded again. Those are different statements. Camille's jaw tightened. She exhaled through her nose, slower this time, forcing control back into her body. You're twisting this, she said. Julian didn't react. I'm listening. The simplicity of that response unsettled her more than any accusation could have. Because he wasn't attacking. He was documenting. Another silence. He let it stretch. Long enough for her to feel the absence of direction. Long enough for her to try to fill it. There's no one here, she said again, quieter now, as if reducing the volume might reduce the weight of the lie. Julian's eyes didn't leave her. Then what made that sound? Camille froze, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. What sound, she asked too precisely. Julian didn't answer immediately. He stepped past her. Not toward the hallway. Toward the bar. He poured himself a glass of water, movements unhurried, controlled. The normalcy of it. Of him. Made everything else feel more unstable. The one that made you look over your shoulder, he said finally. Camille turned toward him sharply. I didn't. She stopped. Because she had. And they both knew it. Julian took a sip of water. Set the glass down. Try again. Camille's composure cracked further. Not visibly dramatic, but structurally. Her posture lost alignment. Her voice, when it came, no longer held the same certainty. You're making assumptions, she said. Based on what? Silence. Julian waited. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't answer without choosing a version of reality. And every version contradicted something she had already said. You said there's no one here. Julian continued calmly. But you also said I misunderstood something. He stepped closer again. Not aggressively, but enough to shift the balance. So help me understand. Camille's eyes glistened now. Not tears, pressure. I'm trying, she said, her voice tightening. No, Julian replied quietly. You're adjusting. That landed. Harder than anything else so far. Because it was true, and she knew it. Behind the door the silence remained. But it wasn't neutral. It was complicit. Julian didn't look toward it again. He didn't need to. Everything he needed was happening right here. You're overanalyzing this, Camille said, grasping again, her tone sharpening slightly as frustration crept in. You came back unexpectedly. You're already suspicious, and now you're building a narrative that isn't real. Julian nodded slowly. That's possible. The agreement caught her off guard. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. Hope, a mistake. But if that's true, Julian continued, then this should be easy to clarify. Camille held his gaze. Waiting. Julian gestured subtly toward the hallway. Open the door. Everything stopped. Again. But this time it wasn't shock. It was impact. Direct. Unavoidable. Camille didn't move. Didn't speak. Her entire body seemed to lock in place, as if movement itself would trigger something irreversible. Julian watched her carefully. This was the moment. Not the discovery. Not the sound. This. The choice. And she was failing it. "Why won't you?" he asked, softly. No accusation. Just a question. Camille's lips trembled. "I told you. There's no one there." Julian's gaze didn't shift. "Then prove it." Her breathing broke. Not loudly, but completely. Because proof required action, and action would destroy the last piece of control she had left. "I don't need to prove anything," she said, but the sentence lacked structure, now collapsing under its own weight. Julian stepped even closer. Close enough that his voice didn't need volume. "You do if you want me to believe you. I don't need you to." She stopped. Because that wasn't true either. She needed him to believe her, more than anything, and she couldn't make it happen. Julian let the silence return, but this time it wasn't empty. It was decisive. Camille looked at him, really looked at him, as if searching for something. Anger, pain, anything she could use. There was nothing, just calm, controlled, detached. That was worse, much worse. "Julian," she said, her voice softening, shifting again, reaching for something more emotional, more human. "We can talk about this. Just not like this." He didn't respond. She took a step toward him. Careful, measured. "You're upset. I understand that. But you're not thinking clearly." Julian's expression didn't change. "No," he said. "I am." The certainty in his voice stripped the last layer of her argument away. Because this wasn't confusion. This wasn't misinterpretation. This was clarity. And she was standing in it, exposed. Another second passed. Then another. Julian stepped back, just slightly, enough to create space, enough to shift the dynamic again. "If there's no one there," he said calmly, "then we're done here." Camille's eyes widened. Not in relief, in realization. Because done didn't mean resolution, it meant conclusion. Without her. Without her version. Without her control. "You're just going to walk away?" she asked, her voice breaking again. Julian looked at her, for a long moment. Then, "No," he said, and for the first time since he walked in. There was something else in his tone, not anger, not yet, but something colder. "I'm going to remember exactly how this looks." The words landed like a verdict, not final, but inevitable. Camille felt it, the shift, the loss of ground beneath her, and behind her. The door remained closed, but no longer hidden, just waiting, like everything else, to be revealed. The silence didn't settle. It thickened. Camille felt it pressing against her ribs, making each breath shorter than the last. Julian hadn't moved much. Just a step back, just enough distance to observe. But the room no longer belonged to her. Not the space. Not the narrative. Not even the timing. "You're not being fair," she said, the words coming out sharper than intended. It was the first shift, away from defense toward attack. Julian didn't react. "Fair," he repeated as if testing the word for weight. "Explain that." Camille straightened slightly, clinging to the structure of argument, something familiar, something she could still control. "You came back without telling me?" she said, her voice gaining momentum. "You're interrogating me based on assumptions, not facts. That's not fair." Julian nodded once. "You're right." The agreement hit her off balance again. She paused, but only for a second. "So, stop," she pressed. "Stop turning this into something it isn't." Julian's gaze held hers. "And what is it?" She exhaled sharply, frustration breaking through. "Nothing. It's nothing, Julian. You walked into a quiet apartment and decided to. Camille." Her name cut through the sentence. Not loud, but final. She stopped. Julian stepped forward again, closing the space she had just tried to reclaim. "Let's stay with facts," he said. Her throat tightened. "Fine." He watched her for a moment longer. Then, "You said there's no one here." "Yes." "You also tried to stop me from walking down that hallway." Camille's jaw flexed. Because you're acting irrationally. Julian didn't respond to that. Instead, he shifted slightly, his attention drifting. Not toward the hallway this time, but toward the entryway. Toward the small console table. Camille followed his gaze instinctively. Another mistake. Julian noticed. Of course he did. You moved my keys this morning, he said. The statement seemed unrelated. Random. Camille blinked. What? They're always on the left side, he continued calmly. Today, they were on the right. She frowned slightly, thrown off. I don't see what that has to do with. It means someone else touched that table. The room went still again. Camille opened her mouth, closed it. That's ridiculous, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction now. Julian tilted his head slightly. Is it? He let the question sit, then added almost as an afterthought. You don't move things without putting them back. That landed differently, because it wasn't accusation. It was familiarity. Precision. Julian knew her, better than she had accounted for. Camille turned away from him, pacing once, twice, as if movement might restore some control over her body. This is insane, she muttered. You're analyzing where keys were placed like it's evidence of something. Julian didn't interrupt, didn't correct her. He let her build it, let her lean into it. Then, your calendar, he said. She stopped, slowly, turned back. What about it? Julian met her eyes. Dinner, initials only. Her face shifted, barely. But enough. It's a client, she said quickly. I abbreviate names all the time. Julian nodded. You don't abbreviate internal clients. Silence. Camille's mind moved fast now, searching, recalculating, trying to stay ahead. It's not internal, she corrected. It's external. Julian watched her. And you didn't mention it this morning. I don't have to report every detail of my schedule to you. No, he agreed. You don't. Another pause. Then. But you usually do. That was the problem, not the lie. The deviation. Julian wasn't chasing inconsistencies. He was mapping them. Camille's breathing grew uneven again. This wasn't working. Denial wasn't holding. So she shifted, abruptly. You're unbelievable, she snapped, anger breaking through cleanly now. You come in here acting like some kind of investigator, dissecting everything I say, everything I do. What exactly are you trying to prove? Julian didn't flinch. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then, what do you want? The question came out louder than intended. Too loud. It echoed slightly. From the hallway. A response. Not a voice. Just a shift. But it was enough. Camille heard it. Her anger faltered instantly, cracking into something more fragile. Julian didn't look toward the sound. He didn't need to. Instead, he looked at her. And this time, he let a fraction of something through. Not emotion, but intent. I want you to keep talking, he said. The words landed with precision. Camille stared at him. Understanding slowly, painfully began to form. This wasn't confrontation. This was exposure, and she was doing it to herself. Her voice softened again, shifting into something else. Desperation now raw and unfiltered. Julian, please, she said, stepping closer. We're making this worse than it needs to be. Just stop for a second. He didn't move, didn't respond. She reached for him, her fingers brushing his arm lightly. He didn't pull away, but he didn't acknowledge it either. That was worse. We've had distance lately. I know that, she continued quickly, words spilling now, searching for something that might still connect. But that doesn't mean. This isn't what you think. You're taking pieces and turning them into something else. Julian's gaze dropped briefly to her hand on his arm, then back to her eyes. You're right, he said. Hope flickered again. A reflex. A mistake. I am taking pieces, he continued. And then, I just haven't shown you all of them yet. Everything stopped. Again, but this time the silence didn't feel like uncertainty. It felt like inevitability. Camille's hand fell away from his arm. Slowly. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely holding. Julian studied her for a long second, then reached into his coat pocket. Not quickly, not dramatically, just deliberately. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it, scrolled once, then turned the screen toward her. Camille looked and froze. It wasn't a photo, not explicit, not undeniable on its own. But it was enough. A timestamp. A lobby camera still. Her. And Adrian Cole. Standing too close. Too familiar. Too late at night for it to mean anything else. Camille's breath caught. Her entire body went still in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't panic. This was impact. Direct. Unavoidable. She started. Nothing followed. Julian watched her carefully, then lowered the phone. "That's from 3 weeks ago," he said. Calm. Measured. "I have more." The words didn't rise. They didn't need to, because the power had already shifted. Completely. Camille's composure didn't crack this time. It collapsed. Her eyes filled instantly, not with controlled emotion, but with something far less stable. "You went through my things," she whispered. Julian's expression didn't change. "No." A pause. "You just stopped hiding them." That was the final fracture. Because it wasn't just the evidence. It was the realization. He had been watching. For how long? She didn't know. And that uncertainty was suffocating. Camille took a step back, then another, as if distance might undo what she had just seen. But there was nowhere to go. Not anymore. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking fully now. It's not what you think." Julian didn't respond. Not immediately. He let the silence close in around her again. Let her feel it. Fully. Then say what it is. She couldn't. Because now, every version of the truth led to the same place. And Julian was already there. Waiting. Camille didn't answer. Not because she wouldn't. Because she couldn't. The image on Julian's phone had done something irreversible. Not just exposing the affair, but collapsing the illusion that she still controlled the narrative. Whatever version of reality she had been constructing was no longer stable enough to stand on. Julian slipped the phone back into his coat. Unhurried. Final. The absence of it felt heavier than the proof itself. "You don't understand," Camille repeated, but the sentence had lost direction, now drifting without structure. Julian studied her for a moment. Then, "You're right." The agreement landed softly. Too softly. Camille looked up at him, confusion cutting through the panic for just a second. "I don't understand everything," he continued. "Not yet." A pause. "But I understand enough." Her throat tightened. Enough for what she asked. Julian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved past her. Not toward the exit, toward the hallway. This time, Camille didn't try to stop him. She couldn't. Her body reacted. A small shift forward, a reflex, but it died halfway like something inside her had already accepted what was coming. Julian reached the bedroom door, pushed it open. Slowly, deliberately. The hinge didn't make a sound. Adrian Cole stood near the far side of the room, fully dressed, too composed, as if still trying to hold on to a version of control that no longer existed. For a second. No one spoke. Julian took him in with a single glance. Not analyzing, not questioning, just confirming. Adrian didn't step forward, didn't explain, didn't even try. That told Julian everything he needed to know. "You should leave," Julian said, calm, measured, not a threat, a decision. Adrian hesitated, not out of defiance, out of calculation. His eyes flickered once. Toward Camille still standing in the living room, then back to Julian. Whatever he was searching for, he didn't find it, because Julian wasn't engaging. He wasn't confronting him. He wasn't even acknowledging him as a factor. Adrian adjusted his jacket slightly, the motion controlled, but not clean. a crack in composure. "Julian," he started, voice low, attempting something neutral, something diplomatic. It doesn't involve you anymore," Julian said. The interruption was quiet, but absolute. Adrian stopped, and in that moment, he understood. This wasn't a confrontation he could win. Not here, not like this. So he nodded once. Tight, minimal. Then walked past Julian out of the room. Camille stepped back as Adrian entered the living room. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. The distance between them, once invisible, now felt deliberate, strategic. Adrian didn't try to bridge it. He walked straight to the door, opened it, and left. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. No resistance. The door closed behind him with a soft final click. Silence returned, but it was different now. Cleaner, sharper. There was no longer a hidden presence, no ambiguity, only the aftermath. Julian stepped back into the living room. Camille stood exactly where he had left her. But something had changed. Not just panic anymore, not just fear. Awareness, slow, spreading. What are you going to do?" she asked. The question came out small, stripped of everything she had tried before. Julian didn't answer right away. He walked to the bar again, poured another glass of water, took a sip, set it down. Every movement controlled, every second intentional. Finally he looked at her. "That depends." Her breath caught. "On what?" Julian held her gaze. "On how much you think I already know." The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. Camille felt them anyway, sharp, precise. She shook her head slowly. I don't know what you mean." Julian studied her for a long second. Then, "You met him 6 months ago," he said. Not a question. A statement. Camille's eyes widened. "You started seeing him regularly 3 months after that." Her lips parted. No sound came out. "You adjusted your schedule to align with his travel patterns. New York, Boston, San Francisco." Each detail landed heavier than the last. Julian stepped closer. Not aggressively, but with purpose. "You told your firm those were client meetings." Camille's breathing broke. "You rerouted communications through your personal email to avoid internal tracking." She took a step back, instinctively, but there was nowhere to go. "And you signed off on a media strategy last month, tied to one of his investment targets." That was it. That was the shift. Not emotional. Structural. Camille's entire posture changed. Her panic didn't disappear. It transformed. Because this was no longer just about betrayal. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Julian's expression didn't change. "I'm saying," he replied quietly, "this isn't just an affair." The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. Camille stared at him, the implications forming too quickly, too clearly. "No," she said immediately, shaking her head, the denial sharper, now more desperate. "No, that's not what this is." Julian didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just watched. "You don't understand how my work functions," she continued, grasping again, trying to reframe, to redirect. "We handle high-profile clients. There's overlap. You disclosed internal positioning to an external party," Julian said. "Flat, final." Camille stopped. Completely. Because now, there was no interpretation left. Only consequence. "That's not." She started, but her voice failed halfway. Julian stepped closer again, close enough that his next words didn't need volume. "Do you know what that looks like from the outside?" Camille's eyes filled instantly. This time not from emotional pressure. From understanding, from calculation, from the realization that the ground beneath her wasn't just unstable, it was gone. "They'll call it collusion," Julian continued, "or insider coordination, depending on who finds it first." Her hands trembled now, uncontrolled. "That's not what happened," she said, but the sentence sounded smaller than before, weaker, Julian tilted his head slightly. Then explain it. She couldn't, because explanation required a version of events that didn't exist anymore. Every path led to the same conclusion. And Julian already saw it. "You've been watching me," she whispered. Not a question, a realization. Julian didn't deny it. For how long? He held her gaze. Long enough. That was worse than any number, because it meant she had never been as hidden as she thought. Camille's composure finally gave out, not in a dramatic collapse, but in something quieter, more devastating. She sank slightly, her posture folding inward, as if her body could no longer support the weight of what she now understood. "This will destroy me," she said, barely audible. Julian didn't respond immediately. He let the words exist. Let her hear them. Let her feel them. Then, "That depends," he said again. She looked up at him. Hope didn't return this time. Only fear, on what she asked. Julian met her eyes, and for the first time, there was something unmistakable in his gaze. Not anger, not grief. Control. On what I decide to do with it. The power had shifted. Completely. And Camille finally understood it. The ballroom at the Langford Hotel was engineered for perception. Crystal chandeliers muted gold lighting, and a carefully curated guest list of media executives, investors, and public figures. It wasn't just an event, it was a stage. And Camille Mercer had built her career mastering exactly this kind of room. 3 days after everything collapsed inside her apartment, she stood at the center of it again. Perfectly dressed. Perfectly composed. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Up close, the fractures were there. Subtle. Controlled. But present. Her movements were a fraction too precise. Her smile held a fraction too long. And her eyes. Her eyes kept searching the room not for admiration, but for threat. For him. Julian hadn't said he would come. He hadn't said anything, actually. That silence had become its own kind of pressure. Unpredictable, untraceable, impossible to manage. "Camille over here." A photographer gestured, camera already raised. She turned automatically, her posture aligning into something practiced and effortless. Flash. Another. A brief exchange of polite words. A handshake. Every interaction followed the script. Because the script was the only thing she still controlled. Or believed she did. The event was tied to a major campaign her firm had been leading for months. A high-profile launch for a tech investment group with national exposure. The kind of project that defined careers. The kind that couldn't fail. Camille moved through the room with calculated precision, greeting partners, acknowledging clients, maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. Every conversation felt like a test. Every glance felt like suspicion. And beneath it all, a single question repeated over and over. "How much does he know, Ms. Mercer?" A voice called out, polished, professional. She turned. The event moderator stood near the stage, tablet in hand. "We're ready for you in 5 minutes." Camille nodded. "Of course." Her voice held. Barely. Backstage, the air felt different. Quieter. Less forgiving. Camille stood alone for a moment, her reflection staring back at her in the narrow mirror. She adjusted her earring. Then again, it didn't need adjusting. Her phone buzzed in her hand. An unknown number. She hesitated, then opened the message. Checked the guest list again. No name. No context. But she knew. Her breath caught. Not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice. But internally, something tightened. She locked the phone. Didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because now, she was certain. When Camille stepped onto the stage, the room shifted. Applause. Polite. Measured. Expected. She took her position at the podium, hands resting lightly against the edges, grounding herself in something physical, something real. "Good evening," she began. Her voice smooth, practiced, unwavering. The words came easily. They always did. She spoke about innovation, about vision, about the future of strategic partnerships in a rapidly evolving market. She referenced growth metrics, projected expansion, the alignment between media influence and investment strategy. Every sentence was clean, structured, controlled. No one listening would have guessed what had happened 3 days ago. No one, except one. Julian stood near the back of the room. Not hidden, not central. Just present, watching. His expression gave nothing away. But his timing was exact. Camille saw him halfway through her speech. Not immediately, but eventually. And when she did, everything inside her paused. Just for a second. A flicker. A fracture. Small enough that most wouldn't notice. But he did. Of course he did. Julian didn't move, didn't signal. He just stood there, waiting. Camille continued. Because she had to. Because stopping would mean something worse. And as we look ahead to the next quarter, we remain committed to transparency, integrity, and the word caught. Integrity. It hung there. Longer than it should have. Julian's gaze didn't shift. Camille recovered quickly. Too quickly. And strategic alignment with partners who share our long-term vision. Applause followed. Right on cue. She stepped back slightly, allowing the moderator to return to the stage. This was the transition point. The safe exit. The moment she could leave without incident. Without exposure. Without collapse. Thank you, Camille, the moderator said with a smile. Before we conclude, we have a brief segment prepared, a highlight of the campaign's development over the past few months. Camille froze, not visibly, but internally. Everything stopped. That won't be necessary, she said quickly, turning slightly toward him, her voice still controlled but sharper now. The moderator blinked, caught off guard. It's already cued. That's fine. She interrupted softer this time, trying to correct the tone. We can skip it. A pause. Confusion rippled subtly through the room. Julian didn't move. Didn't react. He didn't need to. Because the shift had already begun. The screen behind them flickered to life. Camille turned, slowly, as if delaying the inevitable might somehow soften it. It didn't. The first image appeared. A still frame. Grainy. Black and white. A hotel lobby. Time-stamped. Her. And Adrian. Standing too close. Too familiar. Too undeniable. The room didn't react immediately. Not yet. Because context hadn't fully formed. But Camille. She knew. Her body went still. Completely. The microphone picked up a faint, involuntary sound, barely audible but real. But, turn it off, she said, her voice low, controlled but cracking at the edges. No one moved. The second image appeared. A different angle. A different night. Same pattern. Same proximity. Whispers began. Soft. Contained. Spreading. Camille turned sharply, scanning the room. Her eyes found Julian instantly. Of course they did. He hadn't moved. He hadn't needed to. This wasn't chaos. This was design. The third image appeared. This time. Documents. Email headers. Partial threads. Enough to suggest coordination. Enough to imply intent. The room changed. Not loudly, but decisively. Conversation stopped. Attention sharpened. The tone shifted from curiosity to recognition. Camille stepped back from the podium. Her composure didn't shatter all at once. It fractured, layer by layer. This is taken out of context, she said, her voice reaching for stability, failing to find it. These are private. This is not. Her words collapsed under their own weight. Because explanation required structure, and she had none left. Julian stepped forward. Not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. Each step measured. Each second intentional. The room parted slightly instinctively, making space without understanding why. He reached the front, stopped just short of the stage, and looked at her, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with something far more final: clarity. "You built your reputation on control," he said, his voice carrying without needing volume. The room went still. Camille stared at him, unable to move, unable to interrupt. "You understood narrative," he continued. "Perception, timing, a pause. And you thought you could manage this the same way." Her breathing broke, again. But this time, there was no recovery. Julian didn't look at the screen. He didn't need to. He had already chosen what mattered. "You didn't just betray a marriage," he said. The words landed clean. Precise. "You compromised professional boundaries to serve a personal relationship." A murmur moved through the room. Low, controlled, but unmistakable. Camille shook her head, stepping forward slightly, her voice breaking fully now. "That's not what happened." "Then explain it," Julian said. The same words. The same tone. But now, in front of everyone, she couldn't, not here, not like this, not with every version of the truth collapsing the moment it formed. Her silence was the answer. Julian held her gaze for one last second, then stepped back. Just slightly. Enough to end it. Without raising his voice. Without forcing anything further. Because the damage was already done. The screen went dark. But it didn't matter. The room had already seen enough, heard enough, understood enough. Camille stood there, alone. Not physically, but completely. The applause didn't return. The conversations didn't resume. Only the quiet remained. Heavy. Permanent. And for the first time, she realized there was no version of this she could recover from. The silence didn't break when the lights dimmed. It followed her. All the way off the stage. All the way through the corridor. All the way into the private lounge where someone, she didn't even register who, closed the door behind her. Camille stood there, staring at nothing. Her hands were still, too still, as if any movement might confirm that this was real. Outside, the event continued in fragments. Voices lowered conversations, redirected damage already being managed without her. That was the first sign. They weren't defending her. They were distancing. Her phone started vibrating. Once. Twice. Then continuously. Notifications stacked faster than she could process. Messages, missed calls. Emails marked urgent. She didn't open any of them. Didn't need to. She already knew what they would say. The narrative had shifted, and she was no longer the one controlling it. The door opened. A familiar figure stepped in. Richard Halpern, senior partner at her firm. He didn't sit, didn't greet her, didn't soften anything. "Is there anything you want to explain before this escalates further?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry. It was procedural. That was worse. Camille blinked slowly, trying to gather something. Anything. That still resembled control. "It's not what it looks like," she said. The sentence felt hollow the moment it left her mouth. Richard didn't react. "We've already received inquiries," he continued. "From clients. From internal compliance." A pause. "And from legal." Camille's breath caught. Not visibly. But enough. "This will pass," she said quickly, the words forming faster than her thoughts. "It's a misrepresentation. The footage doesn't show context." "The emails do," Richard cut in. That stopped her. Completely. He held her gaze. "You used internal strategy data in proximity to an external investor you were personally involved with. No accusation, just fact." Camille's throat tightened. "I didn't." "Don't," he said, quieter now. Not harsh, but final. "We're initiating a formal review effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation." The words landed clean. No escalation, no emotion, just outcome. Camille stared at him, suspended, not warned, Not protected. Removed. This is temporary, she said, her voice smaller now, searching for something to hold on to. Richard didn't answer right away. And in that silence, she understood. He didn't need to. I suggest you retain counsel, he said finally. Then he turned and left. The door closed. Again. Final. Camille stood alone. This time, completely. Her phone buzzed again. A new message, different tone, short, direct, from Adrian. We shouldn't communicate anymore. No explanation, no apology, no hesitation. Camille stared at the screen, waiting for a second message, a correction, something. Nothing came. Her hand trembled. Finally. The first visible crack. She typed quickly. What is this scent? The response came almost instantly. This is damage control. That was it. No name, no emotion, just strategy. Camille let out a small broken breath. Not a sob. Not yet. Just the sound of something inside her losing structure. By the time she left the hotel, the city felt different. Not louder, not harsher, just indifferent. As if nothing had happened. As if everything had. The apartment door was unlocked when she returned. Of course it was. Julian was inside, exactly where she had left him. Standing near the window, looking out over the city. He didn't turn when she entered. Didn't acknowledge her immediately. He already knew she was there. The silence stretched. He let it. It's done, she said finally. Her voice didn't carry anger or defense, just exhaustion. Julian nodded slightly. I know. She stepped further inside, her heels quieter now against the floor, as if the space itself demanded it. They suspended me, she continued. They're opening an investigation. Julian turned then, slowly, his expression unchanged. And Adrian? He asked. Camille let out a hollow breath. He's gone. A pause. Of course he is. Julian studied her for a moment. Not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, just clarity. Camille looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since everything had unraveled. I didn't think you'd do this, she said. The words weren't an accusation, they were realization. Julian tilted his head slightly. Do what? This. She gestured vaguely, the motion fragile, incomplete. All of it, the timing, the event, the exposure. Julian held her gaze. You think this was about the event? Camille frowned slightly. Confusion again. Then, what is it about? The question formed in her eyes before she spoke it. Julian stepped closer. Not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate. This started long before tonight, he said. She shook her head faintly. I know you said you've been watching, but... No, he interrupted, softer this time. You don't. That landed differently. He reached into his coat again, pulled out his phone. Not to show her the same images. Something else. He tapped once, then turned the screen toward her. Camille looked, and this time, she didn't freeze immediately. Because at first, it didn't make sense. A document, clean, official, legal formatting. Then the words aligned. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed, dated, weeks ago. Camille's breath stopped. Not caught. Stopped. Her eyes scanned the page again. Then again, as if repetition might change it. You. She started. Nothing followed. Julian lowered the phone. I didn't come back today to find out if something was wrong, he said quietly. The room felt smaller, tighter. I already knew. Camille's knees weakened slightly, but she didn't fall. Couldn't. Not yet. You let it happen, she whispered. Julian's expression didn't change. No. A pause. I let you continue. That was worse. Much worse. Because it meant every moment, every lie, every choice she thought she was hiding had been seen, understood, allowed. Why, she asked, her voice breaking fully now. Not defensive, not strategic, just human. Julian looked at her, and for the first time, there was something else in his gaze. Not anger, not pain, finality. Because I needed to know exactly who you were when you thought no one was watching. The words didn't rise, but they cut clean, deep, irreversible. Camille's composure collapsed completely. Not dramatically, not loudly, but entirely. Her shoulders folded inward, her breath breaking into something uneven, uncontrolled. I made a mistake, she said, the words spilling now, too late, too raw. I thought I could manage it. I thought it didn't mean anything. You thought it wouldn't reach me, Julian said. She shook her head desperately. No, I thought I could fix it before it did. Julian held her gaze. You didn't. Silence. Final. Camille's voice dropped to a whisper. Is there anything left? The question hung there. Fragile. Broken. Julian didn't answer immediately. He stepped back. Just slightly. Enough to create distance. Enough to make it clear. Then, no. One word. Complete. The room didn't react. But something inside her did. Something final. Because this wasn't anger. This wasn't punishment. This was absence. Total. Julian picked up his keys. The same ones she had moved days ago. He looked at them briefly, then at her, and for the last time. There's nothing left to fix, he said. Not cruel, not cold, just true. He walked past her, didn't stop, didn't hesitate. The door opened, then closed, and Camille stood alone, in the space where everything had ended. Not suddenly, not violently, but with precision, with clarity, with consequence. For the first time, there was no version of the story she could rewrite, no perception she could control, no outcome she could negotiate, only the truth, and the life she had destroyed, piece by piece, choice by choice, until there was nothing left.